Nicola Sturgeon would be perfectly at home in the Green Party. I think most of the members of the SNP would be perfectly at home in the Green Party. I mean, the reason the SNP is slightly different than the Green Party is maybe they're just a little bit more pragmatic. They realise that a lot of the electorate are not quite ready for some of the Green Party's ideas. If you look at the SNP's education policy, it's basically geared towards producing young people who will agree with the Green Party on anything. So it's no surprise that the SNP and the Greens have entered into this sort of semi-coalition type agreement to govern Scotland, because they agree on most things in any case. What I'm going to do in this video is just have a quick look through their agreement and share a few of the lowlights with you. Right, here we go. Right, a referendum. We will secure a referendum on Scottish independence after the COVID crisis. This should be within the current parliamentary session on a specific date to be determined by the Scottish Parliament. I thought that was quite amusing, because the SNP always gets criticised for constantly promising some movement on independence, and people say, oh, it's all vague and woolly, there's nothing definite about it. Well, the SNP are obviously trying to respond to that by saying that there would be a referendum on a specific date. You see, we're not being vague and woolly. The referendum's going to happen on a specific date. Then you can say to them, what's that date going to be? Oh, well, we don't know. We don't know yet. But I thought that was quite amusing. They think they can respond to a criticism just by adding a spurious word in. Anyway, let's get on to more meaty content. How about this? To enhance the responsibilities of the Scottish Government and Parliament within the UK, we will identify areas for further devolution, for example, powers to introduce candidate quotas for Scottish Parliament and local government elections as set out by the First Minister's Advisory Council on Women and Girls. So in other words, the Scottish Government wants to have rules about who can stand for election. It wants to have rules about who the Scottish Family Party is allowed to select as candidates. So let's say, for example, at the next Scottish election, if this goes through, we might select our candidates, and let's say our lead candidates in the 8 regions, let's say it was 6 males, 2 females, say. I would imagine what might well be the case, looking at this, is that will be declared illegal. And the law will say, no, you have to have 4 men and 4 women at the top of your lists. We might say, well, we're a small party. That just isn't the way it happens to have worked out this time. And they will say, well, no, that's the law. You either need to not stand in certain regions, or you need to put a person top who's not actually the best candidate, but you have to have 50-50. That's an outrageous interference in the democratic process, but it looks like that's coming in Scotland. It also says, we also share an ambition to extend voting to asylum seekers living in Scotland. Again, that is utterly ridiculous. So that's someone who's come to Scotland claiming asylum, possibly validly, possibly it's a spurious claim, they're just an economic migrant. We don't know until the process is completed. I mean, sometimes even then, you're not sure how reliable the process is. So this is someone who's arrived very recently, are in some sort of accommodation centre pending the results of their asylum application, and they would be given a vote. Given a vote, for example, on whether Scotland becomes independent or not, or who should be the government of Scotland for the next 5 years. That's just completely ridiculous. It's playing the system, it's gerrymandering. They think that's what's going to benefit votes for the SNP and for the Greens, so that's what they want to allow. Again, highly anti-democratic and a major problem. Right, what do we get to next? A bit more of what you'd expect here. In respect, including action to tackle gender pay gap and create a more diverse and inclusive workplace. In other words, measures to rig the system against certain groups and to promote other groups. So their mission will be that women need to be paid more, men need to be paid less. So by whatever means necessary, that needs to happen, by maybe pressurising companies to promote more women and less men, etc. And just generally talking about diversity, inclusive. So you can imagine the same sort of approach will come out with race, etc., which will fuel resentment, and it's just unfair. This is just a little snippet. Introduce new rights for tenants, for example, giving tenants greater flexibility to decorate their homes and to keep pets. So if you own a property and you decide you're going to let it, and you decide you don't want the extra risk and maintenance, whatever, of having a pet in there, and you say no pets, then this seems like they're going to give them a right to have a pet, so the tenants can overrule the landlords. I mean, for starters, it's a bit petty, but it's just unfair, and it's just trying to court votes from a section of society regardless of any sense of natural justice. Child poverty, all the usual things, completely ignoring the main driver of child poverty, which is family instability and family structure. A minimum income guarantee, that's something we're against as a Scottish Family Party. So, I mean, the details are unclear, but it seems like that will be something that people receive regardless of their willingness to work, whereas at the moment benefits, there is some sort of connection between willingness to work and seek work and getting benefits, but I think this would remove it because it's an income guarantee. It doesn't depend on anything, it's guaranteed. This will be a biggie. We will reform the Gender Recognition Act. The SNP has kicked that into the long grass a little bit in a bill introduced in the first year of this parliamentary session. Well, we're 4 months into the session already, so they've got 8 months to introduce a bill. I would imagine with the new batch of MSPs, there will be less opposition to it, and that will go through. So it'll be heading more towards just self-certification of gender. You fill a form in and you've officially changed sex, and everyone has to treat you as if you are a member of the sex that you're not. I mean, world-leading human rights legislation. The reason for that is, as I've spoken about before, human rights legislation gets interpreted in a way that supports a very progressive, left, liberal point of view. So the Greens and the SNP are all for that, and a lot of that will involve handing power over to judges and courts rather than to the electorate. Right, another one here. Bring forward legislation to implement a ban on conversion therapy in Scotland. I think that was in both manifestos in any case, but that's the government making it doubly clear that they are going to ban like talking therapies for someone who's got unwanted same-sex attraction. And I also imagine that definition will also cover gender identity. So if a person says, I'm a man, but I really feel that I'm a woman, if someone were to say, if they were to say, no, I really don't want that, I don't want to feel like a woman, I just want to feel like a man, that's what I am. If someone were to say, let me talk to you about that, I want to help you with that, maybe we could pray about it or something like that, then I think that will be covered by the definition of conversion therapy. So that is an issue we need to monitor very, very closely in the coming months. Tackling gender-based violence, say 3/4 of violence is against men, but all the focus is on the 25% of violence which is against women. Again, just sexism. Education. So work jointly to take forward a programme of education reform, incorporating the recommendations of the OECD, Scotland's Curriculum for Excellence, into the future, etc., etc. Now that report talks about moving away from sort of exam-based system to a significant degree. The Greens, I think, would like to have no exams in schools at all. I think they would like teachers to make up the grades on entirely subjective criteria, because that fits their sort of anti-meritocratic philosophy. So the Greens' influence in education, I think, will be terrible. And I've already said, I'm not sure there's ever going to be exams again in Scotland. I think with the Greens now in power in this way, that makes that more likely. Establishing a national care service. Now, I think that's something that could potentially be a good thing. The big issue, of course, is how to pay for it. I mean, that's been challenging governments of different hues, UK and Scotland, for many a decade now. So that's the core issue here, is the financing of it. But for the Greens, that's probably not really an issue, because they just assume you keep borrowing money forever and that all works out just fine. But that will be interesting to see how that develops, a national care service for the elderly in particular. Now, mental health is another thing. It's strange. It seems like sort of liberal, left, progressive parties seem to be really obsessing even about mental health. So increase spending on mental health services to 10% of the total frontline NHS budget by the end of this parliamentary session. Okay, so what are they going to spend less on? I assume that's an increase in the amount on mental health. So there's going to be a decrease in the percentage available for everything else. But they don't mention what's going to be cut, obviously. Work with health boards to ensure that at least 1% of all frontline spend goes on children and adolescent mental health services by the end of this parliamentary session. Again, giving that as a percentage just seems completely irrational. If there's a certain amount of money that needs to be spent, then say so, and try and provide the services necessary. To express it as a percentage of the whole, that just seems like a soundbite to me. It doesn't seem like a rational way of planning a health budget. Anyway, increase the focus on raising awareness of understanding of mental health and mental wellbeing issues, both in schools and colleges. Again, I'm not sure that's entirely helpful, because there's this introspective teaching children basically that professional mental health support should be seen as a routine need to get through the day, the week, the year, whatever. That people should just expect to need that sort of support, rather than friends, family, other sorts of support structures, which I would suggest are probably more effective in many cases, more organic, but they want this focus on professional support. I've been trying to think through, why is that? Why are people on the more very much towards the left of politics, why are they so keen on talking about mental health? And I haven't quite worked it out. The only thing I can think of, if you think about the real extreme right in politics, they might glorify strength and independence and self-sufficiency. So when you get towards like the extreme left with the Greens, for example, do they glorify dependency? I mean, I'm not saying that mental health issues are a sign of weakness, but do they glorify dependency and the need for support, that sort of thing, the need for care? That's as far as I've got. Maybe it's something to do with that. I don't know. If you've got some other theory, put it in the comments below. Right, gender identity services. So this is the medical clinics, so-called medical clinics that offer so-called healthcare to trans people with gender identity disorder, which of course isn't a health issue at all, but it needs these clinics to treat it. How that makes sense, I don't know. A plan for permanent transformation of the service will also be developed, published by late 2021, implemented 2022-24. This plan will improve access to and delivery of gender identity services over the next few years, including adopting a human rights-based, person-centred and multidisciplinary approach. Right, human rights-based and person-centred. That means they will just do what other people want them to do. They won't try and steer people in a direction particularly. Not particularly interested in balanced advice necessarily. It's just what a person says. If a person says they want something, then they'll try and do exactly what that person says. Okay, even though maybe a lot of people might look at that and think they're not sure that's a good move, particularly at that age, for example, but they want to bypass that and just do exactly what people say. And remember, medical consent in Scotland is from 12 years upwards. So I think there are concerns there as well. Just one last small thing here. I've heard the Greens talking about grouse moor management, because there's some processes they're doing with grouse moors. I think they might burn off sections of them or whatever to enable the grouse to flourish, and then there's people go and shoot them as a field sport. Now, it tends to be wealthy people that do that, so obviously this is not the Greens' favourite thing. When I've heard the Greens talking about it, they often include the point there's wealthy people who go shooting. And you listen to it, and I've often been left with the impression, what are these Greens really more bothered about? Are they really bothered about the management of moorland? Or are they just concerned with trying to sort of give one in the eye to wealthy people? I tend to think the latter in some cases. So that's just a quick look through some of the lowlights and some of the concerns of the SNP and the Greens programme that they've concocted together. Okay, thanks. Goodbye.